Joining us now to discuss is Matt Blom, Global Head of Sales Trading at EQONEX, a Singapore-based crypto exchange. Hi there, Matt. Thanks for joining us. So is Bitcoin's price volatility a matter of buy the rumor, sell the news, or will Bitcoin futures ETFs truly drive the price of Bitcoin up long term?
Yeah, I think we've been waiting for this moment for a long time. It's been about 8 years since the first application was put in by the Winklevoss brothers for an ETF, and it's been a long time coming. And I think what we've seen over from the end of the summer into this moment really has been the anticipation that we would finally get an ETF in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So I think the price appreciation has been seen because of that, and I also think that when you consider, we're going to be able to see that the size of these ETFs growing through open interest on the CME, which you just showed on the screen. We're really going to be able to see, on a daily basis, the institutional appetite and the retail investors that now have access to this asset class through ETFs.
So what is your strategy for navigating the volatility going forward?
Well, I think it's interesting, but I think long-term, the volatility of Bitcoin will actually reduce due to the introduction of ETFs. And as these products become more widely used, and as they kind of feed through the more traditional investment space, what it will actually do is reduce the volatility in Bitcoin as we move forward. Mm-hmm. And we've seen that already, post this halving from what we've seen for the previous two halvings, is that actually the volatility in Bitcoin, amazingly as it sounds, is actually dropping.
All right. Well, we're certainly seeing volatility short term as the market stabilizes or finds its way. But I'm wondering, would a spot ETF have a greater impact than a futures-based ETF on Bitcoin? And perhaps in your answer, you could explain the difference in your view between a futures ETF and spot Bitcoin ETF.
Yeah, for sure. I think at the moment there was around 7 futures ETFs in process of application with the SEC, and there's around 11 physical Bitcoin ETFs in application at the moment. And as positive a news that the futures ETF is, and what that brings to a wider audience of investors that essentially can now come into this space and can invest in a way where they don't need to worry about owning and looking after Bitcoin. They can just invest in a product that probably sits on a platform that they're already very used to using. So it's lowering barriers of entry. Now, the spot version of an ETF, which is the one that's really going to drive the price much higher than we've seen from what we've seen since the futures ETF was launched, is purely because what people are waiting for there is the supply of physical Bitcoin to keep reducing. And we've seen exchange balances fall dramatically this year. And what we are seeing is that the hodler behavior is increasing, and the available supply of Bitcoin is falling to levels that we haven't seen for years. So a spot ETF would actually quicken the pace, and it would actually create the kind of the supply issue that many are predicting for the future for Bitcoin, which is very price appreciative.
Mm-hmm. And CoinDesk has reported that Grayscale, the sister company to CoinDesk, has reiterated plans to convert its BTC trust, which is the world's largest investable crypto vehicle, into a spot-based ETF. So if that happens, will be big news. You also have a chart on Bitcoin's market cap approaching silver. And when looking at top assets by market cap, gold sits at the top with over $11 trillion in market cap. Bitcoin is in 8th place behind silver, but beating out Facebook and Tesla. What do you make of this standing?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting. And you can compare Bitcoin to the big tech stocks, basically, because a lot of these tech stocks work on a network effect in much the same way that Bitcoin does. But when we look at the finite supply of an asset, obviously the flippening with silver is the next on the list for Bitcoin to tick off on its journey of many landmarks. And I think the approval of a physical Bitcoin ETF will probably be the day that flippening actually happens. Now, Bitcoin has a long way to go before it can ever challenge gold. we would need to see Bitcoin prices with the current supply north of $620,000. So there's some way to go before Bitcoin can challenge gold, but it feels like it's only a matter of time before it takes over silver.
Okay, but do you think it could one day beat out gold or overtake it?
Well, I mean, that all depends on the value of gold as much as the value of Bitcoin. And as we move from an analog world to a digital world, if investors decide that gold is not the asset of the future and that Bitcoin is, actually the price depreciation that you may see in gold over time, coupled with an increased price in Bitcoin, is actually going to make it much easier for Bitcoin to take that number one spot at some point in the future. I certainly would expect it to happen in our lifetime.